Hello and welcome to Blessings and Curses, a brand new review cast from the patron saints of pop culture. As always, I am Miguel Covarrubias. I am actually going to be the only voice on this review cast because I am the one who went to go see this movie. So this is a brand new show that we are going to be doing. We are planning on making this a Patreon exclusive. But for now, we're going to be putting this out when we can through our current host on Spreaker. So go check it out. Go check out our regular show, the Patron Saints of Pop Culture. We have close to 70 episodes up now, which is fantastic. We love doing the show. We love pulling out principles out of the parables of these pop culture icons that we have watched. Today, I'm going to be talking about Ready Player One. Spoiler alert, if you have not yet gone to see the movie, it's completely different than the book, so we'll just put it there right away. But if you've read the book, if you've not read the book, then spoilers for that as well, because I am going to be talking about both. The reason being is that I am a huge fan of the book. When I first got my hands on the book, I finished it within a week. Never have I gone through something this quickly. This big, this quickly, and I loved it. I loved Ernest Cline's book. It just was fantastic, and so ever since I finished that book and I heard almost immediately that they were thinking about making a movie, that I was completely on board. I was ready for this movie. I've been waiting for this movie for close to, 2018 now? I think close to 4 or 5 years that I've been waiting for this movie. And now that I finally saw it, well, we'll get into that here in just a second. But the way that this show is going to go is that we are going to give our blessing, which is a good review, or a curse, which is a bad review. If we do a blessing, we'll talk about the good things that happened in the movie and the things that we thought helped to further the artwork in viewers and audiences' minds and stuff like that. For curses, we're going to talk about things that could have been done to fix the movie. Doubt that anybody is going to actually listen to us for these, but we would love to see some of these fixes be done, maybe in future movies or something else like that. So let's start this off. Ready Player One, from me, is getting a curse. And this is why. I have broken this down into 3 different areas. I am breaking this down into character, plot, and setting. First of all, let's talk about the characters. I really did not feel for any of the characters. I thought that almost every single character in this movie was generic. They were very two-dimensional. The only character that I thought did a great job of actually being a fully fleshed out, fully, out there character was H. H was the only character that I thought actually was a character that I could actually get behind in the movie, which I think, it's not really saying a whole lot. And I think H played a much larger role in the book, but again, I have to separate the book from the movie, it's going to be extremely difficult for me because there were things in the movie that were there to get the readers there, but they also did such a disservice to the book that it's difficult to separate the two. One of the very first things that I want to mention about this is the damseling of the strong female character. Artemis was an extremely strong female character, and I think that they did a huge disservice to her as a character, is that she became a damsel in this movie that needed to be saved by male characters. And not just that, but also, H is not a male character, and if you've read the book or seen the movie, you know that H is not a male character, but spoiler there. Here, Artemis is really kind of dumbed down, is really stripped of being that strong character, that she gets joy out of being that damsel, out of being saved and rescued. And I know that they threw in a few lines in there to kind of make it so that she wasn't, but it wasn't enough. It was still just a very two-dimensional, very just not their character. You also have the villain here in this, which is the IOI Corporation, which is just very bland and generic. And in fact, the inside scenes of the Loyalty Center, of the IOI headquarters, it all just made it look very bland, generic office building. And I mean, I work in an office building. I work in a cubicle. And honestly, I thought that it was so bland that my cubicle could put the entire building to shame. No office building is that generic anymore. And I think that the entirety, all the IOI people, all the IOI, the oologists and the entire staff was very generic. And in fact, I thought it was a little bit funny that they brought up John Hughes movies during the meeting with IOI, because the main villain looks like the principal from The Breakfast Club. And which is funny because just recently we saw in the news this one Florida state congressperson that she was kind of dressed like that and saying horrible things about teenagers. And I thought that was just too good. But the thing is that he became very generic like that. There was no backstory. He was not believable as a villain. He was not believable as having any motivation to actually want to do any of this, except for increasing the IOI stocks, which, why? Like, there was no motivation behind it. And there is motivation in the book. And I realized that I have to separate the two, that they are two completely different pieces of work. But in this one, the characters aren't there. It's not believable. It's not something that you actually want to engage with. You also have a very unmotivated protagonist with Wade Watts. There is so much in the book that kind of sets up the character, that develops Wade as this person who you do want to root for, but you also don't want to root for in some instances, especially when he talks to Artemis about what he would do if he won the Easter egg, is that he would buy that mansion, and if the world was going to blow up, that he was just going to build a spaceship and just, go off into space where he could just be, by himself and all this other stuff. And really kind of, it solidifies who he is as a character, that he's been a loner his entire life, that, he's grew up in this really bad situation. And, you did see this in the movie a little bit. They did throw in a little bit here and there, but Parzival, Wade Watts was not a good character. He was not fully fleshed out in the movie. He falls in love with Artemis way too quickly. It happens in the span of 20 minutes. They've been together for maybe 2 hours in movie time. I mean, come on, throw a montage in there or something. Give some more homage to 80s nostalgia. Which brings me to my next point, which is plot. The plot was horrid. They completely tore apart the entire book. They threw out almost everything from Ernest Cline's work. And I know that Ernest Cline was the co-screenwriter on this, but it was kind of like, Ernest Cline, you had one job. All you had to do was copy and paste. That's all you gotta do. Like, throw in a few stage directions and you're good. But the 80s nostalgia was completely ripped out of the movie. And I realize that people are kind of a little over 80s nostalgia, but like the Duffer Brothers had done an amazing job of doing this with Stranger Things, that, you could have taken some from that. In fact, the things that were thrown in there, they were obviously thrown in there as fan service, like the Zemeckis cube and the DeLorean, and those were the things that he got later on. He got the DeLorean because he was actually had money then. It really felt like a lot of Steven Spielberg was just patronizing those of us who were supposed to be the key demographic of this book. Those who grew up in the late 80s and 90s and just really kind of latched on to this pop culture stuff. And what's funny is that was one of the key motivators or key dividing factors between the protagonist and the antagonist was that you could tell that he didn't know anything about pop culture, but it showed very much that Steven Spielberg doesn't know anything about pop culture. He doesn't know what made his movies good. He doesn't know what made the 80s and 90s such a great time for this pop culture referencing that was going on, that was supposed to be happening in this book and supposed to be happening in this movie that didn't happen. And in fact, they removed the best parts of the book. For me, I absolutely loved the gates. I loved the gates. I loved the fact that there were added challenges on there, like the completely reenacting war games. That was my favorite part of the book. I have to say that was one of the things that I was looking forward to the most, was seeing how they were going to do that in a movie fashion. And they completely ripped it out of the movie. It's a completely different plot than it was from the book. And, you know, I really feel like Steven Spielberg doesn't know his fans. He doesn't know what they want. I think Ernest Cline doesn't know his fans. He doesn't know like what they wanted either. I think that, both of them really kind of got off track with the movie. And really, I think the plot was it just didn't do enough for what it was trying to be. It was trying to earn the credit off of the book to be able to run this movie without doing any of the setup for those who hadn't actually read the book. And those who did read the book were completely done a disservice by the entire movie. So I am really surprised why some of the reviews for the movie are so good. And then on top of all of that, you have Columbus as unbelievable. This is a setting that, you know, from Ohio myself, now that I live in Ohio, been through Columbus a few times, and it's not believable as a setting. Even in the future, in 2040, whatever, that this is taking place, that it's not believable. Like, it looks like a backlot at some studio, which is not a good thing. I mean, the Oasis is beautiful. They did a great job of building that world of the Oasis. They did a great job of kind of making the Oasis a place that people wanted to be. That everything though was really generic. It really felt like if you were to completely, like the entire plot of the movie, this is the movie's plot, which is completely separate from the book's plot, the movie's plot is that people should spend more time outside getting to know their actual world. But that world that they're getting to know is so generic that it's like, why would you want to spend time outside in that world? There's nothing there. There's nothing worthy of taking your attention outside of it. They didn't even set that up. If they had set that up, then they would have been able to earn a little bit better of a plot point for that. They would have been able to make the movie a little bit more believable. And I can understand moving everything closer together. I can understand moving everything from where in the book everything is spread out across the country and across the world, that they moved it all closer together to be in Columbus so that it can be this one setting. And so that the action can take place in that same place, that it can be hurried, and that they fit so much into the 2 hours that it was. But I think that it didn't earn the right to be able to do that as a movie. They didn't spend enough time building the world before the world actually went into motion, before it actually started taking place, before the action started happening. I think the world building was off, and therefore the plot was off, which makes all of the characters just useless. You don't want to engage with it because you don't have a world that you can actually relate with any of the characters in. And I think this is essential, the big three essentials when it comes to movie making, is that you need a good setting, you need good world building, and that can be done in just a few minutes. You need good characters, believable characters that you can relate with, that you can actually empathize with, that you can actually understand where they're coming from. And you also need a good plot, because if you have both of those things but not a good plot, then why are you watching the movie? There's no reason to stay there. And so those three things, I think this movie just completely failed on all of it. I mean, it looks great. Don't get me wrong. I love the visuals. The visuals were the best part of this movie, but it didn't do enough to earn those visuals. So here are the things that I believe that this movie could have done better, that it could have fixed right away. Now, this first one. I can't believe that I'm saying this because I absolutely despise trilogies. I despise trilogies because most of the time the second movie is just horrid. That they're just bridge fillers to kind of get from point A to point B, and they never really accomplish what, just being a standalone good movie. Except for Godfather 2, which, that's a completely different story for a different day. Then you also have, The Dark Knight, which is a different story for a different day. That all of those were built as standalone movies that actually did good. But this one, I really feel like you could have broken this movie up into 3 parts. You could have had, the first movie being the world building, being the quest for the Copper Key and the Copper Gate. You could have thrown in all of that good fan service and then set up a good kind of cliffhanger for the second part, for the Jade Key, for the Jade Gate. And you could have thrown in a lot more of the book, and you could have thrown in a lot more of the Easter eggs and the things that made the book such good feeling for those of us who actually read it. For those of us who grew up in that time period thinking, this is my childhood. These are the things that I would have loved to do. I would love to take the place of my favorite character in war games. I would have loved that. And just, throwing in just a few minutes of him doing that in this movie would have been just incredible. And I know that there's time constraints. I know that trying to fit all of that in is hard, which is why I say that you should break it up into a trilogy. Because if you break it up into a trilogy, you have each of these things where you have a complete character arc for each and every gate and key. And you have a complete and learning experience for each and every character in that. You have the ability to show IOI as a complete horrid organization, to the fact that they actually killed Shoto in the book, and all of these things that you could have done, but you didn't do. The second thing is to rethink the demographic. I feel like Steven Spielberg made a movie for children, and children who are into the most hip game at the time being, and that was Overwatch when he was making this movie. But everybody's moved on now. Everybody's now into PUBG and Fortnite. And the thing is, Overwatch is kind of over. And so now, it's those fan service things that they threw in there, they didn't make sense anymore. They really needed to rethink the demographic of being millennials. Millennials who grew up in the 80s and the 90s, who were the main demographic of this book. This book was not for YA. It was mainly for us who grew up in that time period. Because that's where we get all the references. We understand that. But not only that, I think that they could have adjusted the difficulty settings on this movie. If, almost every single plot point was like a riddle that was so easily solved, and it was solved by movie-going audiences. They treated the audience like they were dumb. And the thing is, they're not. Most of us read the book. So, when we go to see this movie, we understand that these riddles are going to be difficult, that it took Wade Watts Parzival so long to find these the Copper Key and the Copper Gate. It took him so long to figure out the riddles and to understand the world that he was in, and Anorak's Almanac and all of that stuff. I really feel like they did a huge disservice by making it easy, extremely easy. And it really needed to be turned up a notch. This was more like on the par of National Treasure, kind of, the map is on the back of the Declaration of Independence kind of thing. So anyway, those are the things that I feel like could have fixed this movie, that could have turned it from a curse to a blessing. So anyway, with all that being said, I thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me on this. Come listen to our regular show on Spreaker. Come find us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, all of that. You can also find us on our website, thehonestfaith.com. Also, if you have something to say about my review here, you can definitely send it to us at honestfaithconvos@gmail.com, or you can send me a voicemail or text at 720-372-3879. All right, thank you so much for listening, and with all of that being said, we invite you to come and join the conversation.